In the small towns of America, where people still leave their windows open to catch the morning breeze and call to one another from their front porches, tragedy often arrives without a sound. On what seemed like an ordinary summer afternoon, sisters Amber and Kay stepped out of their home with the soft, easy smiles every child their age carries. No one in town knew it would be the last time they saw the two girls moving through the familiar rhythm of everyday life. When the clock pushed into late evening and the porch light kept burning in quiet hope, silence slowly turned into fear. Their mother called their names from the living room, her voice echoing and then falling flat, swallowed by the emptiness around her. No signs of struggle, no notes left behind, only a complete disappearance. What could take two children from a community that believed itself safe? And that question has haunted the town for more than 2 decades. What truly happened to Amber and Kay on their final day? Before they became the center of a heartbreaking disappearance, Amber and Kay were simply two girls growing up in the slow, easy rhythm of a Midwestern town. Amber, 15, was quiet and perceptive, like the pages of the diary she filled every night. Kay, 3 years younger, was lively and curious, always trailing behind her sister with her worn-out sneakers and a smile that never seemed to fade. Each morning, their light-hearted arguments over who spent too long in the bathroom echoed through the small house at the end of a maple-lined street. Their mother, Denise, worked the morning shift at the pharmacy near the town square. She usually woke before the girls, brewed a pot of strong coffee, and set out 2 slices of toast for Amber and Kay to grab on their way out. The family wasn't wealthy, but they had something far more precious, a sense of peace they each tried to protect for one another. In the evenings, the 3 of them would sit on the front porch, sharing small stories about their day. The glow from neighboring houses slipped through the leaves, creating that familiar warmth of an American town, where people believed tragedy lived far away. Amber loved books, especially adventure stories that made her dream of distant places. Kay loved to draw, and the living room wall still held faint pencil marks from when she was 4. They grew up inside those simple things, within their mother's love and the laughter that drifted from the kitchen on weekends. No one imagined that an ordinary afternoon could be the last time they were seen safe in their family's embrace. And it's that very image of quiet, unbroken life that has made their disappearance a wound that never fully heals for everyone who remembers the 2 sisters. That morning held nothing unusual. No hint of trouble, no small sign that might have made their mother keep them home, even a minute longer. Amber and Kay stepped out the door with the familiar excitement of 2 girls growing up, while late summer still carried the scent of freshly cut grass and warm breezes drifting over the brick-lined streets. They planned to visit Southgate Plaza, a small shopping area where local teens browsed clearance racks or stopped by the convenience store for cold soda. For Amber, it was a chance to pick up a few things for the new school year. For Kay, simply being with her sister was enough. According to their mother, the girls lingered in the living room for a few extra moments before leaving. Amber knelt to retie Kay's shoelaces, laughing as she reminded her not to run too fast when crossing the street. Kay hugged their mother, then tugged at her sister to open the door. No one knew that this gentle, ordinary moment would become the last memory the family had of them. Security footage at the entrance of Southgate Plaza captured the sisters at 2:17 p.m. Amber walked ahead, a small bag in her hand. Kay followed closely, turning to smile at someone passing by. They looked so normal, so completely at ease that no one could have imagined they would vanish just hours later without leaving a single trace. That footage has been replayed hundreds of times over the years, by investigators, by family, by strangers who never knew the girls but couldn't stop searching for meaning in each frame. Yet nothing stood out. No one followed them. No one acted suspicious. Only 2 children moving through a day that seemed like any other. What haunts the town isn't only the disappearance itself, but the thought that they walked out of that frame with carefree steps, stepping into an afternoon that would become the greatest mystery the community has carried for decades. The car was found in the early evening, just as the streetlights began to spill their glow across the road leading out of Southgate Plaza. A passerby noticed the familiar grey sedan parked slightly crooked along the curb, its door pulled almost shut, as if someone had stepped out in a hurry. In small communities, where everyone knows whose car belongs to whom, that alone was enough to make someone pause and look closer. When police arrived, the first thing they noted was the absence of any forced entry or struggle. Everything inside was intact, almost impossibly neat. Amber's wallet sat on the front seat, still holding the little photographs she kept to remind herself of home. In the console lay the bag of candy Kay had bought that afternoon, unopened. The light jacket they brought in case the evening turned cool still hung neatly behind the seat. Everything made the car feel like a moment frozen in place, as if the girls had stepped out for just a minute and would return any second. But they never did, and that is what made the scene so chilling. What puzzled investigators most was the missing key. It wasn't on the seat, not on the floor, not tucked anywhere in the girls' belongings. A perfectly tidy car, left behind without a key, gave the mystery an even heavier weight. If the girls left the vehicle willingly, why take the key with them? If someone led them away, why leave behind every important thing they carried? The questions layered over one another, thickening like the fog that settled across the town that night. When their mother arrived at the scene, she stood in silence, one hand covering her mouth, the other gripping the edge of the car door as if trying to hold on to the last trace of her daughter's warmth. People later said the way she looked at the wallet on the front seat was something the town would never forget. There was no screaming, no chaos, only the pure, devastating fear of a mother who understood that something terrible had slipped quietly into her life. And from that moment on, the abandoned little car became the first clue, and the sobering marker of a mystery that would keep the entire community awake for decades. When the car was found and the girls still hadn't shown up, their mother called the police with a voice so shaken, the dispatcher had to ask her to repeat herself twice. She tried to stay composed, but every sentence broke apart, as if someone were tightening a hand around her breath. In small communities, bad news always travels faster than any wind. Within less than an hour, neighbors were already gathering on their porches, exchanging worried glances heavy with fear. Officers arrived and swept their flashlights along the roadside and around the parking area. Denise walked behind them slowly, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. She kept calling her daughters' names, calling as if the girls were simply hiding somewhere and would jump out laughing, ready to run into her arms at any moment. But there was no answer. Only the night wind and the sound of distant cars fading down the dark road. When the clock slipped past 10, a spontaneous search began. Neighbors who had watched Amber and Kay grow up grabbed flashlights and split into small groups, combing the streets around Southgate Plaza. They called the girls' names as if calling for their own children. The older residents brought extra jackets, draping them over Denise's shoulders when they saw her trembling from cold and fear. The younger ones posted online, hoping someone, anyone, had seen the sisters earlier that afternoon. But alongside the worry came the first waves of misinformation. Someone claimed they saw a pickup truck crawling behind the girls. Another said they heard arguing near the parking lot. No one was certain of anything, yet in panic, every detail became a frightening possibility. Police worked to filter each report, trying to keep the search on track, while Denise waited in silence, her eyes fixed on the dark stretch of road ahead, as though she might see her daughters walking toward her from the shadows. Those first hours were not only chaotic, they were a moment when the entire community held hands against a shared fear. They didn't know what had happened. But deep down, everyone felt that from the moment the car was left behind, the town had stepped into a night unlike any it had ever known. Once the missing persons report was confirmed, the official investigation began like a drumbeat echoing through the heart of the community. The first officers on scene didn't just carry out a duty. They carried a fragile hope that the two girls were simply lost somewhere, waiting to be found unharmed. But the deeper they dug into every detail, the more they felt something darker settling over the town. Police teams retraced the sisters' steps. They watched every frame of every camera, every second of movement, as if each image carried a whisper from the past. In the final video, the girls appear for only a moment, two brief sparks moving calmly through the crowd, unaware it would be the last time the world ever saw them. Officers paused the footage, zoomed in, examined everything from their expressions to their stride, searching for anything out of place. But all they found was a calm so perfect it was frightening. Statements were taken from friends, from passers-by, from shop owners. Everyone recalled what they could, but many stories didn't line up, as if people's memories were fracturing under fear. One person said they saw the sisters laughing. Another thought someone might have been following them. The more police listened, the more the urgency tightened like a cold draft creeping down the spine. Phone data was checked. The last text, the last call, the last location. Each data point felt like the faint echo of hope stretching a little longer. But then, every signal stopped abruptly, silent in a way that felt deliberate, as if an invisible hand had shut down both the phones and the girl's fate at the same time. In a temporary briefing room at the police station, a map of the town was spread across the table. Red pins marked the places where cameras caught glimpses. Blue circles marked the areas that needed to be searched. And at the center of it all were the sisters' faces on the missing poster. Their innocent eyes seemed to follow everyone in the room, asking what had happened to them. At this point, the investigation was no longer just an assignment. It had become a promise that even with scarce clues and shadows growing thicker, no one would stop, not until they uncovered the truth hiding within that terrifying silence. When the first leads fell apart, the theories began to surface like faint silhouettes rising through fog. The quiet little town, so used to its own calm, now murmured different stories. Each account felt like a scattered puzzle piece, yet none of them fit cleanly with the others. One resident claimed they saw a strange man lingering around Southgate Plaza that afternoon. His face was described so vaguely it bordered on unreal. Tense eyes, a slow, cold stride, as though he were watching someone. When police followed that lead, all they found were faint traces and a silence so thick it felt suffocating. But the idea of that stranger left a dark smear in everyone's mind. Then came the story of a dark pickup truck. A woman who lived near where the sisters' car was found said she noticed a truck creeping unusually slow that evening. Its headlights sweeping across the roadside as if the driver was searching for something. But when police checked cameras and traffic logs, the truck dissolved into nothing. No license plate, no identification, just an uneasy feeling clinging to every retelling. More tips poured in, but they gradually contradicted one another. Some insisted the girls were seen with a group of teenagers. Others said the sisters were spotted outside a store, looking around as if waiting for someone. Each story rose like a wave, lifting hope one moment, dragging it underneath the next. Investigators were forced to confront a harsh but familiar truth. People remember more than they think, but they forget even faster. The theories were analyzed, charted, pinned onto the town map. Yet when compared, each one collapsed into a dead end. No clear evidence. No connections. Not a single trail leading to where the sisters might be. The stalemate cast a heavy quiet over the investigation room, and for a moment, fear glimmered in every officer's eyes. The fear that something crucial was hiding in plain sight. For the family, every theory was a cut to the heart. Their mother felt both hope and trembling dread each time the police stopped by, knowing that behind every story lay a possibility. And possibility always carried the shadow of the worst-case scenario hovering just within reach. The town kept talking, the darkness kept thickening, and the theories, no matter how many surfaced, could not hide the simple, devastating truth. At that moment, no one knew where the sisters had gone, or what had truly happened during those fateful hours when they slipped out of the world's sight. The first 6 months passed like a storm. The police phones rang non-stop. Search parties stretched from sunrise to long past midnight. Every patch of forest, Every creek bed, every forgotten lot was combed by flashlight beams and footsteps fueled by hope. But when winter came, silence settled over the town like a layer of frost. After a year, the posters with the sisters' faces began to fade in the wind. The ink bled. The eyes in the photos lost their sharpness. People still remembered, but they spoke less. Words of encouragement, once offered to the family every single day, grew sparse, then vanished, as if everyone feared that mentioning the pain would tear the wound open again. The police kept working, but the reports grew heavier with repeated lines. No new leads, no new evidence, nothing. 10 years passed. Long enough for a child to become a teenager. Long enough for a strong hope to wither into something fragile. The family's home still kept Amber and Kay's photos in the living room. Each year, on the anniversary of their disappearance, their mother lit 2 candles and placed them side by side. The small flames trembled in the dark, just like the thin thread of hope she tried to hold on to. Even when it had grown so faint, a single breath could extinguish it. She no longer had the strength to speak to the media as she did in the early years. Her voice had grown hoarse, her eyes deeper from countless sleepless nights. She said the most frightening thing wasn't the truth. It was not knowing where the truth was hiding. Not knowing if her daughters had suffered, not knowing whether a mother would ever hear a final goodbye. The police labelled the case a cold case. A simple term. But to the family, it felt like an admission that time had won. That every door they had tried to open for years led only to an empty room. Time didn't answer. It didn't comfort. It didn't return what it had taken. It simply moved forward. And as 10 years turned into 15, then 20, the sisters' case became a shadowed chapter in the town's history. A story everyone knew, but no one dared speak about for long. As if mentioning it would disturb something sacred and unbearably painful. But for the family, even today, the 2 candles are still lit every year. Because when everything else has gone cold, the only thing that stays warm is the love of those who remain. 22 years after Amber and Kay disappeared, the case seemed buried beneath the dust of time. Old filing cabinets sagged under stacks of yellowed reports, each page telling the story of an investigation carried out by a generation of detectives long gone. No one believed there was anything left to find. No one expected the darkness to split open and reveal the thinnest beam of light, quiet, fragile, but strong enough to shake an entire town. It started in a storage room at the very end of a crumbling hallway in the local police department. This was where old evidence boxes sat untouched, sealed and forgotten as time crept over them. During a routine archive inspection, a young investigator noticed a box with no clear label. The tape was peeling, the writing faded into near invisibility. But when he lifted the lid, he immediately sensed these items didn't belong to any recent case. A child's worn-out shirt, a faded purple hair tie, a small notebook with a few pages still showing the handwriting of a little girl. All of it had been collected in the early days of the investigation 22 years ago. And then, for reasons no one could explain, abandoned in that cold, lonely room. No one had ever re-examined them with modern technology. No one imagined that inside a dusty box could lie a message carried across time. When the evidence was sent to a modern forensic lab, the expectation was nothing more than proper digitization. But then, a sudden alert came from the lab. On the inner seam of the shirt and on the old hair tie, a set of fingerprints emerged, shockingly crisp, impossibly well preserved for evidence that old. And the results showed something even more unsettling. The prints did not belong to any family member, any search volunteer, or any original investigator. They belonged to someone else entirely, a person whose name had never once appeared in the case. News spread through the department like electricity. Amber and Kay's mother was invited in to hear the report. When told that new evidence had surfaced, her shoulders trembled in silence. Not from hope, but from fear. Fear of hoping too much and breaking all over again. She sat there with her hands locked together, struggling to remain steady against a wave of emotions she had spent decades trying to contain. Detectives whispered to one another in the hallway. No one dared call this the breakthrough, but no one denied what they all felt. For the first time in over 20 years, the case had a direction, a fingerprint, a person somewhere out there, a possibility that the past was no longer motionless. The case that had stayed cold for more than 2 decades suddenly stirred back to life. As if time, cruel as it may be, sometimes returns something to those who have waited far too long. When the fingerprints from the forgotten evidence box were run through the national database, the result wasn't what investigators hoped for, but it was exactly what they needed. The prints matched a man who had once lived near the Southgate area at the time the sisters disappeared. He carried a long history of disturbing behavior, trespassing, harassment, and multiple allegations involving minors, none of which had ever led to conviction due to lack of evidence. He had left town years ago. His life was a patchwork of missing years, long stretches where no one knew where he had gone or what he had done. But fingerprints do not lie. As police retraced his path, a once blurry picture began to sharpen. On the day Amber and Kay went missing, he had been seen near Southgate Plaza. The statement had been filed decades earlier, but dismissed as insignificant. He had no obvious connection to the girls. Now, paired with new physical evidence, that old testimony became the key to a door long sealed shut. Investigators reconstructed what might have happened that afternoon. Amber and Kay may have left Southgate Plaza earlier than expected. Crossing through a quiet stretch, they could have encountered him. A greeting, a question, an offer of help. Small moments children rarely see as danger. After that, everything could have shifted in an instant. Too fast for the girls to cry out, too fast for anyone in that peaceful town to notice something had gone terribly wrong. Though police have not released the full findings, the truth now emerging seems less likely to come from a confession and more likely to come from the things forgotten for more than 2 decades. A small shirt, a faded hair tie. Objects that could not tell their story aloud, yet carried the imprint of a stranger's hand, and a chain of actions he believed he had buried forever. When the mother learned the identity of the potential suspect, she went still for a long time. No tears, no words. She simply placed her hand on the framed photo of her daughters, as if trying to send them an apology for making them wait so long to be this close to the truth. She said something the young investigator would never forget. She said she wasn't looking for revenge. She was looking for an answer, just one answer to what happened on the path her daughters walked on their final day. At last, after 22 years, the case was no longer a complete mystery. The scattered pieces had begun to find their place. And even though the picture wasn't whole, it was enough to bring the family closer to what they had been searching for most of their lives. Even though the suspect's identity had been uncovered and many pieces of the puzzle finally began to align, the case still carried shadows no one could fill. Every step closer to the truth opened yet another door, and from behind it emerged a new question, born from things once thought certain. It was as if this case had not only been buried by time, but wrapped in a thin fog that no human hand could completely clear. One of the strangest mysteries was the evidence box that went missing for 2 decades. No one could explain why such important items had been misplaced, nor why they were never re-examined as forensic technology grew more advanced. In internal discussions, some suggested it was merely an administrative error. But others wondered whether someone, back then, had underestimated the case or accidentally overlooked something that could have changed the entire direction of the investigation. The next question lay within the witness statements from that year. Several witnesses had reported seeing the suspect near Southgate, yet their accounts were not thoroughly documented. Many details were vague. Some lines were crossed out. A few pages were missing entirely. Perhaps it was simply the chaos of those early days when panic rippled through the town. But to the family, every missing detail felt like a wound. If those leads had been examined more carefully at the time, would the outcome have been different? No one truly knows what happened after the sisters stepped out of the final camera frame. Investigators reconstructed a possible sequence based on what little remained. Yet many fragments were still missing. Did the girls follow the suspect because they trusted him? Or were they coerced? Did someone witness something but chose to stay silent? Did someone hear a faint cry for help carried by the wind and turn away? These questions cannot turn back time, but they linger, persistent, aching, like an echo that never fades. Even the fingerprints carried their own mysteries. Why was a man with such a troubling history not scrutinized more closely that year? Why did he leave town so abruptly once the case intensified? And was he truly the only one involved? Or was there someone else hidden in the background, never once mentioned in the reports? A mystery rarely stands alone. It is formed by small links that sometimes take years for people to finally see. The mother, despite hearing about the new breakthrough, still carried in her heart questions no report could answer. She often said that what hurt the most wasn't the truth, but the part of the truth that was missing, the part she knew she might never hear. She wanted to know what her daughters had gone through, who was with them in their final moments, and whether they knew their mother had been searching for them every single day, right up to this one. These unanswered questions do not slow the case down, but they remind us that in tragedies like this, justice is not always the ending. It is only one fragment of a much larger sorrow. And some questions may remain suspended forever, like a part of the story that time simply refuses to explain. There are stories that never close with a verdict, stories that do not end with a complete truth. They simply fade into the memories of those who have lived through the loss. And the story of Amber and Kay is one of them. The two sisters will forever remain the children who stepped out into a sunlit summer day, only to vanish from this world, leaving behind a trembling town and a family exhausted from waiting. For more than 20 years, their mother has kept the ritual of lighting 2 candles on every anniversary. Those small flames are not only a tribute, but a quiet way of saying that her love has never cooled. Each time someone looks at that light, they understand that there are sorrows time cannot erase, no matter how it tries. And there are loves that no darkness, no matter how long, can extinguish. The community where the sisters grew up still keeps a small memorial beside the church, a plaque engraved with their names, a simple wooden bench, a gentle quiet where anyone who once knew them can sit down, place a flower, or simply breathe deeply to remember the peaceful days that were lost. Generations of children have grown up hearing this story as a reminder of how fragile life is, urging them to love each other more, to look closer, and to truly listen. When the case was reopened after 2 decades, many believed it was a small gift returned by time, not to erase the pain, but to affirm that what happened to the 2 sisters has never been forgotten. Truth, even when late, is still a light. And even a faint light is enough to illuminate the dark years their family had to walk through. In the final narration, the storyteller often pauses for a long, quiet beat, because this is not just a story of crime or investigation. It is a story of the human heart, of the persistence of love, of a mother who never stopped searching, of 2 children taken far too soon, whose memory continues to echo in the prayers of everyone who has heard their story. We end today's journey with a tribute to Amber and Kay, 2 small lives that left deep footprints in many hearts. May their souls find peace somewhere, even if the truth remains unfinished. And may their family, after so many years of waiting, finally find a place of quiet rest. Life does not always return what it takes away, but it gives us the right to remember, the right to retell, and the right to hold those who are gone close to our hearts, like 2 candles that never go out.